even of Mar-a-Lago and said to them, I have an idea. I'm going to borrow more money than we have ever borrowed in the history of that community. What are you doing with the money, Mr. Bessent? We are going to give it to the richest people in America, the richest people in our community, because we know George Soros understands the math. We are at the beginning of what's going to be a vigorous conversation about the country's fiscal health. You've described our deficit as alarming, and yet you're here with the same Trump tax policy that has burdened the American people with another $2 trillion of debt that their kids and grandkids are going to have to pay back. And despite the conversation we've heard over here, clearly, the distribution of it was deeply, deeply, deeply unfair. 50% of it went to the top 5% of Americans, 75% of it, if you add the SALT, which even the Wall Street Journal won't support because it's so unbelievably outrageous, will go to the wealthiest 5% of Americans. The tax policy is one that's hard. It is, for some reason in this room, it makes sense to people. In America, I don't think there's been a mayor in the history of the United States whose tax policy has been to go to the people of New York City or of Atlantic City or even of Mar-a-Lago and said to them, I have an idea. I'm going to borrow more money than we have ever borrowed in the history of that community, and I'm going to spend it. And I would say, well, geez, I'm worried about that. I don't want us to borrow a bunch of money without knowing what it's going for. What is it going for? Is it going for schools? No. Is it going to compete with the Chinese in their defense? No. Is it going to pay for parks? No. Is it going to deal with the mental health crisis that we have in America? No. Is it going to pay to secure our border? No. What are you doing with the money, Mr. Bessent? What were you doing with the money, Mr. Mnuchin? What are you doing with the money, Mayor, in America? The answer is we are going to give it to the richest people in America, the richest people in our community, and expect that somehow that's going to trickle down to everybody else. That has been the Trump tax policy since the day he showed up, and no mayor in America would ever, with a straight face, say that's what they should do. And in fact, no America in history has done that. But to add insult to injury, you sit here, and Mr. Mnuchin sat here at his time and said, it's all going to be paid for by economic growth. We know that's not true. We know it costs $2 trillion. So while the benefit of the richest people in America, the cost is being borne by the children of working people all over this country. And that's what's going to happen now. It's $4.6 trillion this time, not $2 trillion. And then you come here, and this is my question, Mr. Bessent, and you sneak into your opening statement that we have a spending problem, and what we have to focus on, as you said, is discretionary spending after your crocodile tears about how China is out competing us. And as you know, because you're a smart person, and you spent a lot of time on Wall Street, just like your predecessor did, discretionary spending is about a third of our overall spending. 17% of what we spend is domestic. 17% roughly of what we spend is military spending. That spending you were talking about with respect to China. There are so many things I think you owe the American people after we have seen the catastrophe of the result from the tax cuts the last time and the fact that the benefits went to the wealthiest people. But don't you at least owe the American people a refund for the $2 trillion that they've already incurred because of the last round before you get to the $4.6 trillion? Can't we think of a better idea in the halls here than cutting taxes for the wealthiest people and expecting that it will trickle down to everybody else when we have the profound needs that you have talked about? When we're living in an economy, you had the American dream. We heard you say that. where fewer and fewer people can get ahead, where this generation of Americans is going to be the first generation to leave less opportunity, not more, to our kids and our grandkids, where we see massive income inequality and wealth inequality when Trump was president, when Biden was president. Can't we think of a better idea than that? And at a bare minimum, and this is tiny, don't we owe them an answer about what you are going to do to that 17% of discretionary spending, or even the third, before you come in here and say that the most important thing we should do is cut taxes for the richest people in America?
Senator, thank you. And I would respectfully disagree with much of your categorization in terms of the benefits accruing to the richest Americans. Actually, the share of taxes paid by the upper percent of Americans increased after TCJA. It went from 39 to 46%. The top 50% of Americans now pay 98% of taxes, and working families had real wage increases in 2018 and 2019, and going into 2020 pre-COVID. The CBO scoring for the Trump tax cuts got rescored by $1.5 trillion.
Make sure, because we're in the beginning of a long debate, that if you're going to rely on the CBO score for this, that you're going to be willing to rely on it for the things that you said it's no good.
Look, I'm not in love with CBO scoring.
I know that. That's why now you're relying on it. So I'm just saying, it's not funny money. This is the American people's money. We can do math. Every mayor in America has to do math. And we're going to insist that you do the math too, because we know George Soros understands the math when you work there, and you understand full well what's going on here, just like Steve Mnuchin did, just like Donald Trump does, and we're not going to let it happen against the American people.